All right, we're still waiting for just a few participants to join the call. But it is 12:03 and I want to be mindful of everybody's time so that we can close as close to the hour as possible. So I am just going to go ahead and start. Good afternoon and welcome to ComCon 2024, Composting Conversations in celebration of International Compost Awareness Week. My name is Muriel Williman. I'm board president of the North Carolina Composting Council, a state chapter of the U.S. Composting Council. Also on the call and handling the technology, commentary, and questions is the North Carolina Composting Council's new executive director, Catherine Polk. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. We will save them for a Q&A at the end of the program. The North Carolina Composting Council has a full week of compost awareness content. If you want to know more, please visit our website, carolinacompost.com. I'm really looking forward to today's session, closing the loop on compostable plastics. My professional background is in solid waste management, where, among other things, I developed composting programs with event organizers, businesses, government entities, educational institutions, and others to try to create systems that were diverting as much material as possible, but thoughtfully supplying compostable packaging to users and working closely with the large-scale composters receiving the material. There are many challenges to doing so, but when all the pieces are in place, you can boast diversion rates as high as 98%, and composters can rest assured that the materials that are coming to their facility will not cause any issues. They'll break down beautifully at their facility with minimal processing. They can sell high-quality compost without visible residual plastics. I'm sure, however, that others on the call can relate to misleading labeling or lack of compliance with sorting instructions or other sources of contamination, throwing a wrench into the efforts and leading to negative and costly downstream impacts, not to mention an image problem for those of us in planning and implementation roles. So our speakers today are going to have the latest in compostable material development, research, and facility ingenuity to help compostable packaging close the loop. Our first speaker is Elly Ventura. Elly has been part of the materials management industry for over a decade. As the resource recovery manager to World Centric, she brings a very professional background to advance the understanding of certified compostables as a solution to waste reduction and diversion goals. In addition to holding a BA in athletic training and psychology and a master's degree in exercise science, Elly earned a certified composting professional through the U.S. Composting Council in 2022 and serves in an advisory capacity for several state composting councils. Thank you so much for being here, Elly. Take it away.
Great, Muriel. Thanks for the great introduction. Let me get this going here for everyone. Thank you so much for choosing to start your week with us. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm coming to you live from Louisville, Kentucky today, not only because I was here for the horse races over the weekend, but because I'm fortunate enough to call it home as well. And I'm really, really excited to start International Composting Awareness Week with the award-winning North Carolina Composting Council today. Muriel, I'm not sure you dropped that accolade in there, so I wanted to make sure I did that for you. I was really invited here today to share a little bit about the upstream inputs World Centric considers as we bring our certified compostable products to market. We are a leader in the certified compostable manufacturing space, and we're really driven by our mission to foster a better world. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to introduce us a little bit further. World Centric is headquartered in the Bay Area of California, which is where we started. And we now have a new location in the eastern part of the US, which is what brought me to World Centric about a year ago. We have both food service and retail items. Maybe you've seen us in your local co-op shelves or at the Whole Foods in your neighborhood. And we've been doing certified compostables since 2009, but our story begins just a little bit before that, because we started in 2004 as a nonprofit organization, raising awareness about extreme poverty and social and environmental injustice. And to become less dependent on grants and donations, our founder and CEO, who's still at the helm of World Centric today, actually, he began selling fair trade products and compostables just for a regular stream of income. By 2009, the compostable sort of became the main meat and potatoes for World Centric. So we transitioned then to a for-profit company and have been contributing to the certified compostable food service industry ever since. In 2010, we earned our B Corp certification, and after recent renewal, we're really proud to be the highest rated B Corp business in the food service packaging area. So when we made that transition to a for-profit model, it really empowered us to expand our influence to social and environmental topics. To stay true to our original intention to raise awareness about social and environmental injustices, we continue to donate 25% of profits each year to grassroots organizations around the world. And we look for those who are located kind of in the intersection of extreme poverty and environmental injustice issues, just to keep us grounded in that mission to be of service to both people and the planet. And that's really the coolest thing about working for World Centric is our giving. I just get excited every time I get to talk about it. And to date, we have supported almost 300 nonprofits across the world and provided over $17 million in support to them. So now that you've endured that introduction, I'm going to wake you back up with a little quiz. So I'm going to show you a picture and see if you can identify what this is. So this is actually what remained of a paper hot cup that has a polyethylene lining. So this is in a 3-bin, well-managed community compost system for about 2 to 3 months. And when they went to turn the pile, this was pulled out. So the microbes consumed the parts that they liked and left behind that inedible petroleum plastic lining. So while this lining might eventually disintegrate, what's left behind is not going to be compostable. So I want to take just a little bit of time now and unpack the difference between compostable and biodegradable. And I love this visual that was created by the Sustainable Packaging Coalition that helps kind of do a split screen view between these two terms. So something can be biodegradable without being compostable, but it can't be compostable without biodegradation. These terms are used interchangeably quite often, but they really shouldn't be. And we're going to talk about 3 different things that make that true. So the first thing is the environment. So the products are made to be broken down in a specific environment. And if they don't end up in the correct conditions, then they're not going to really do anything as intended. So let's go really into our science lesson here and do some vocabulary. So the definition of biodegradation, according to lab standards, it's the chemical or microbial breakdown of a material within 180 days. That's another differentiator between biodegradable and compostable. So it has a time frame attached to it. Disintegration is the next piece, and that is the physical falling apart of something into smaller fragments. By definition, we need that to happen within 84 days. So biodegradable product may be broken down by microorganism, but it doesn't necessarily imply that what's remaining, what's left over, is going to be converted into good quality compost that isn't going to leave behind something that could be harmful to humans or the environment. And that's the third differentiator. So something can be called compostable once it disintegrates and it biodegrades within those designated timeframes, and it leaves nothing behind that's harmful to plants or humans. We just want to see that beautiful, valuable humus, that soil amendment that's going to actually be beneficial for plants to uptake, and it's going to have a lot more benefits that I could do a whole presentation on just by itself. So after that science lesson, let's do a quick another quiz to see if any of that information makes it any easier to determine which one of these is compostable. So which container is compostable out of these two? It's the one on the left. So petroleum plastic is one of the most prevalent contaminants in the compost stream. And Muriel introduced us with that in the beginning. And it's really hard to differentiate between a bio-based clear plastic cup and a conventional clear plastic cup. It's really hard to do in a 2D webinar situation. It might be a little bit easier to do right at the bin when we finished with our salad dressing or our ketchup or whatever's in that tiny container, but it's still kind of hard. So let's do another one. Which of these cups is compostable? Is it the one on the left or the one on the right? Hopefully this one was a little quicker and a little bit easier for you. Labels and visuals can help, but it's not always that easy. And as Billy might talk to us later, when you're 7 feet up in a loader and you're seeing materials come in by the truckload, maybe the labeling isn't either the perfect thing, but at least it's a starting place. And we at World Centric, we want our products to be diverted to compost piles. We know that our products are only truly compostable when they're managed by composters like Billy and turned back into that valuable soil amendment. We're also aware of the large percentage of our products that are still being disposed of in landfills, and we're really grateful for the important work that closed loop partners in the Compost Consortium have been doing lately to help support the performance of compostables at composting facilities. So I'm going to get going a little bit quicker so we can get to Carolyn and the good stuff. But because of World Centric's strong commitment to both people and the planet, and the reality of that landfill disposal, we're diligent about sourcing materials that carry the lightest impact as possible. We're really selective and give care to our commitment to sustainability throughout the entire procurement, sourcing, and manufacturing process. And we vet our suppliers and factories pretty vigorously. We use 4 main categories of materials that you can see here on the right. We use plant fiber, wheat straw, sugarcane bagasse, which are both agricultural byproducts. We use bamboo, and those are used to make most of our molded fiber. So our plates, our clamshells, to-go containers, the hinge containers. We use biopolymers, primarily PLA, that we can crystallize or we can add minerals to increase heat tolerance and durability of it. We use the PLA in our cold cups and some of our linings and cutlery as well. We use paper, and we're really committed to finding Forest Stewardship Council certified papers and bamboo, which is sometimes hard to do, but it's really important to us that we do source that certified feedstock. And we use paper in our napkins and some of our cups. And then we get really excited about bamboo because it's just a miracle plant. Even though it can kind of take over here in the States. Some people don't like it as much here, but we use a lot of it and we make cups, bowls, cutlery, and it's really the foundation of one of our new no-tree lines here at World Centric. So I want to talk a little bit more about bagasse and bamboo because there are 2 main materials. The sugarcane bagasse is an agricultural byproduct. So it's the fibrous material that remains after the juice has been extracted from the cane stalks for sugar production. And about 1/3 of that plant becomes waste after the extraction of the sugar. So for every ton of sugarcane that's made, there's approximately 27% yield of bagasse. And so we are able to take that byproduct and make it into something new. And that prevents it from being incinerated or landfilled as a waste product. Bamboo, super fun. There are great videos about time-lapse videos about how quickly it grows, up to about 1 meter a day. It matures a little bit faster than some of the other renewable fiber sources out there like teak or eucalyptus. And what is really kind of remarkable and unusual about bamboo is that its roots remain intact after harvest. And so that continues to provide that carbon sink because the roots maintain that contact with the ground and hold that carbon in there. And it also allows for faster regrowth and can be fully mature in 10 years or less. So honesty, ethics, and integrity are our goals at every step and ensures our commitment to sustainability. And we require certifications to validate that. And those certifications make sure that the partners we're working with take into consideration not only environmental impacts of our choice of materials, but also the human aspect, because our mission is to be of service to people and the planet. So we require fair labor practices and performance quality certifications from our suppliers and manufacturers and locations. If they aren't willing to share that with us, we don't partner with them. So what I'm about to share with you next is some really great work that our on-staff sustainability manager has done just to compare some of those life cycle comparisons between the main products that we find in the food service product space. So what we're going to look at first here is the greenhouse gas emissions by comparison, and this is raw materials. And these next 3 slides we're going to see are only comparing production of 1 pound of each of the material types that you can see along the bottom. So we have bamboo, bagasse, polylactic acid, polystyrene, and then this blue bar on the far right is just going to be our point of comparison within these slides. So that's showing how many miles you need to drive a car in the US to equate to 1 pound of production of each of these material types. So I don't know if it's visible to you, but bamboo and sugarcane are actually negative, tiny, but they offset, or they capture some of that carbon. They don't release carbon during their production. PLA produces emissions about enough to drive 1 mile in a US car, and then the polystyrene is about 7 miles in a car. So that's a comparison of our greenhouse gas emissions. The next one we're going to look at is non-renewable energy inputs. So how much energy does it take to make 1 pound of each of these materials? Again, you can see bamboo and sugarcane really don't even register. So there's not a lot of energy input required. PLA is still lower than polystyrene, and our 1 gallon or our 1 mile driven in the US is shown there on the far right for comparison. So you can see that it, again, takes a lot more miles to make 1 pound of polystyrene than it does our biopolymer polylactic acid. And then the last one I want to share with you is just total freshwater use. Freshwater is becoming a scarce resource all over the world. And so we want to be transparent about the water input it takes to make 1 pound of PLA compared to sugarcane, compared to bamboo. So because those are all plant-based sources, they do require a little bit of water. Again, that miracle plant bamboo, hardly any water at all. Sugarcane bagasse, not so much either. Polylactic acid coming from corn or beets or other agricultural products tends to need a little bit more water. Polystyrene doesn't require a lot of water, but when we're pulling a fossil fuel out of the oil, there are a lot of other inputs that go into that. So to summarize this a little bit, I just want to give you, I like visuals, I'm a visual learner. So if we just look at the energy comparison of plastics, petroleum, conventional plastics to bio-based PLA plastic, for every 2 utensils that we can make out of TPLA, you can make 1 petroleum fork. And the same for plates. For every 3 plates that we can make, you can only make 1 plate using the same amount of energy. So I feel like I would be remiss in both my passion and my profession if I didn't address the compostability aspects of our products. So I'm going to leave the compost results and some of the testing results to Carolyn, but I want to give you just a little quick compost math here. If we divert 1 ton of food away from the landfill to a composting facility, we are going to save almost 2/3 of a ton of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to putting that organic material, that food waste, into the landfill. So there is a small amount of methane that's released during the composting process as a byproduct of the microbes doing their work, but not nearly that compared to landfilling. So to stick with our normal comparison here, if we divert 1 ton of food scraps away from the landfill, that's equivalent to not driving 1,500 miles in that US gas-powered car, which is probably more than I drive in a month. So I think that's really a really cool thing about compost, and it doesn't even take into consideration all of the benefits that we garner after we actually have it, use it, and apply it. So you can see a couple of my favorite quotes and even some of my favorite composters. You might recognize the Alber brothers there on the left from the Wilmington Compost Company. Their facility is fantastic. They're a great family. I love working with them. And they have, I don't have them directly quoted on here, but they have had similar statements as some of the other composters who I've had the good fortune to visit. You don't see any of your products in our piles, ... because your stuff actually works. It's breaking down into our piles. So to conclude, I want to bring us back to where we started and give you just one more product picture to see if you can determine whether or not this one is compostable. Here's what remained. This is out of that same 3-bin system at the community composting operation, 2 to 3 months in there, and you can see like the exact lining. Once again, the microbes ate the paperboard. They were like, no, thanks. We're not into PE. We don't want real plastic. So they left everything perfectly intact. You can see in the oval, the slot for how you close the box. The folds here are in the red rectangles. And then the things in the top corners were what was inside that plastic when it came out. So the best bet you have to make sure you have confidence in the products that you're using to be composted is put some weight into those third-party standards and certifications. There are many, many, many out there. So the surefire thing to do is always ask your composter. Check with them. What do they accept? What works for their facility? And what products do they want to manage in their specific system? So that is where I leave you today. Muriel, I'll turn it back to you, and hopefully I kept us on time.
Oh, that is just terrific. Thank you so much, Elly. I loved those data bites. 2/3 of fuel savings, carbon savings between, sorry, not fuel, but carbon savings, 2-to-1 fork production, 3-to-1 plate production. Those are so useful, I think, for people that are trying to promote purchasing compostable products. Anyway, great presentation. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome the next presenter. It's Carolyn Berry. She's the program manager of the Composting Consortium, an initiative of Closed Loop Partners Center for the Circular Economy. The Composting Consortium is a multi-year collaboration across the entire compostable packaging value chain, piloting industry solutions and building a roadmap for investment in technologies and infrastructure that enables the recovery of compostable food packaging and food scraps. She holds a master's in sustainable food systems from the University of Colorado, Boulder. Carolyn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Muriel. It's so great to be here. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are based. And Elly, that was such an awesome presentation. I really enjoyed the quiz. It's cool to see the compare and contrast of the before and after pictures. And like you said, it can be tricky to identify what is and is not compostable without proper labeling. We certainly know that to be true. Anyways, I'm here on behalf of the Composting Consortium, as Muriel said. I'm going to do a very quick flyby of some key insights and learnings from two studies that came out of the Composting Consortium very, very recently. These reports are kind of hot off the press still. They came out in February and April, respectively. But it's data from our in-field contamination study and our compostable packaging disintegration studies, which kind of took place over the span of 18 months from start to finish. Lots of exciting new data and findings coming out of that work. So I'm thrilled to be here today to share it with you all. Before I dive into the studies, I do want to share just a quick overview of Closed Loop Partners and who we are, just so you kind of understand how we operate. Closed Loop Partners is a firm that is focused on building and accelerating the circular economy. So our business model has 3 verticals that help us achieve this goal. Closed Loop Capital Management is our investment arm. We manage assets across various investment strategies and portfolios, including buyout, venture, and catalytic private credit strategies. And Builders is our operations arm and the largest privately held recycling company in the US, actually. Builders is focused on scaling the circular economy through infrastructure build out throughout the United States. And then lastly is our Center for the Circular Economy, our innovation and research arm, and that's where I sit and where the Composting Consortium is sort of housed at Closed Loop Partners. And what we do at the center is we conduct in-market tests and we gather insights to really de-risk and inform the brands that we work with on how to make changes that can reduce waste at scale. So we work with leading retailers, consumer packaged goods companies, material science companies to solve some of the most complex material challenges that exist in the context of the circular economy today. So as I mentioned, I'm here representing the Composting Consortium, which is spearheaded by my colleague, Paula Liu. And the Composting Consortium is a collaboration of really leading industry voices across the entire composting and compostable packaging value chains, as Muriel mentioned in her introduction. So I just like to flash this slide whenever we do presentations because it shows really the diversity of the partner network underneath the Composting Consortium umbrella, including everything from major brands and packaging manufacturers to amazing composters to industry groups and environmental NGOs, as well as some academic institutions, as you see here. And our mission really at its core is to scale more robust, resilient composting systems in the US. And we want to keep organics out of landfill and keep compostable packaging and organics in circulation. And, people often ask why compostable packaging? Well, we believe that food contact compostable packaging is designed to maximize food waste diversion when done well. And we want to make sure it's aligning with, or at least we've acknowledged actually that it's aligning with current trends, things like supporting healthy soil, regenerative agriculture, and also just a lot of sustainability goals that many companies are now adopting related to their packaging portfolios and the waste that they produce. So we entered this space back in 2021, really wanting to support composters as well as brands and manufacturers and just gain a better understanding of the dynamics of the industry at play. So with that context, I'll jump into some key findings from our two latest reports, our contamination study, Don't Spoil the Soil, as well as our compostable packaging disintegration study, titled Breaking It Down, the Realities of Compostable Packaging Disintegration at Composting Facilities. All right, so let's jump into the contamination study. So really the purpose of this contamination research was to address the contamination challenge head on and support the composting industry by bringing some much needed insights to the field, but also to the public. So it was very important to us to quantify and characterize contamination at different points of the process, from feedstock to finished product. We wanted to provide a baseline contamination rate for the industry. And we also wanted to understand, how was the acceptance of compostable packaging potentially contributing to contamination levels? Were there other variables at play here? And lastly, it was very important for us to be able to assign a monetary value to contamination. We really wanted to provide some financial figures that we could share back with the industry that shows how much operational costs are being spent on contamination. And why did we take this on? Just to elaborate a little bit further, as I mentioned before, the consortium launched with a very specific mission to scale food waste composting infrastructure, and as part of that, scale the processing and collection of compostable packaging. Now, we understand and empathize with just how challenging contamination is for the industry. So we wanted this work to be a step forward to help begin to solve that challenge. And we started by measuring it, because we know that you can't solve for what you can't measure or what you don't measure. And this is especially true on the cost side, because we saw a lot of waste characterization studies being done in the market, but there was pretty limited data on the financial aspect of contamination. So again, really critical that to solve for contamination, we address just the growing food waste crisis in the United States. So what I mean by that is that today, we know that there are about 200 full-scale composting facilities that exist in the US who take food waste, but it's estimated that approximately less than 4% of all food waste generated in America is sent to composting facilities, which is really surprising. So apart from hurdles like permitting challenges, we know that a lot of composter hesitation to accept food waste largely stems from this belief that post-consumer food waste might carry with it higher levels of contamination. And specifically, it's not just a reluctance around food waste, but also compostable packaging. In fact, according to Biocycle, 78% of composters who don't take these materials cite contamination, Right, sorry, dealing with a frog in my throat today. I was saying that 78% of composters who don't accept these materials cite contamination as the leading reason. So really want to solve for this challenge in order to move forward. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so before we jump into the findings, I just want to share a slide that captures the methodology of our study. This is a mock-up of an aerated static pile facility. And the stars on the screen highlight where we collected samples at 3 points of the process. Sorry, everyone. Trying to fight through this. So we measured contamination at 3 points of the process, including feedstock overs and unders. And we analyzed the samples on site as well as in the lab using a certain technology to identify polymers that were making their way into the finished product. So by collecting 3 distinct samples throughout the process at each site, we could analyze comparative contamination rates and try to understand if there were any relationships between a facility's ability to handle contamination at different points of the process. Okay, so 3 key findings. Sorry, everyone, that I'm coughing intermittently here. I'm just going to do my best. So 3 key findings from the contamination study was, first and foremost, we wanted to know what was winding up at these facilities, what was causing the most contamination. And we hypothesized that conventional plastics would constitute a significant portion of feedstock contamination. And we were right. We found that on average, 85% of the contamination making its way to facilities is made up of conventional plastic, which the pie graph on the right here shows. It provides a breakdown of the feedstock received at 9 composting facilities who take compostable packaging. On average, they receive about 40% yard waste and woody material, just over 30% food scraps, 22% compostable packaging, and 4% contamination. So as you can see, plastic makes up 3.4% of the total feedstock pie, and that's represented by that orange and yellow slice of the pie. And this consists of things like plastic, rigid plastics, plastic films, wraps, pouches, garbage bags, plastic lined paper, poly-coated coffee cups, things like that. And a lot of these items, which relate to what Elly was talking about in her quiz slides, are what we call lookalikes. So conventional plastic packaging that, appears to be compostable, but is not actually compostable. So it really confirms a lot of prior research that we've done around the need for better labeling and design to prevent these lookalikes from ending up in the stream. The second question we examined was, does compostable packaging allow or lead to higher contamination rates? By allowing it, are you setting yourself up to receive more contamination? And what we found, which ran counter to our hypothesis, is that contamination was a common issue for composters, regardless of whether or not they accept compostable packaging. So there was also no clear relationship between a composter's business model and their levels of incoming contamination. So just looking at the bar chart on the right, this captures feedstock rates across all 10 facilities in our study. Excuse me. And as noted in the key, the yellow bars represent plastic contamination rates. Orange bars represent total contamination rates. And really, contamination span the spectrum from 0% to nearly 19% by volume. And as you can see, there was one facility in our study who did not accept compostable packaging, who fell right in the middle of the pack with the 6th highest rate of contamination. So this suggests that even when a composter has a long-standing policy in place to not take compostable packaging of any kind, contamination is still a real challenge and a barrier. And similarly, composters who have vertically integrated models, meaning they handle both hauling and processing, shows no direct relationship between the business model itself and the feedstock contamination levels. And building off the same key finding, there was also no clear or direct relationship between the amount of food waste that a composter processed and the levels of contamination that they received. So again, this bar chart captures the same cohort of 10 composters who we partnered with, and the contamination rate ranges, but this time we've categorized them based on total tons of food waste processed. And larger facilities did appear to have highest rates of contamination, but as you can see, a couple of the smaller facilities had comparable rates to the larger facilities. We see contamination rates ranging from just over 1% to, again, just shy of 19% in the largest category. And this suggests that there are really several variables impacting contamination rates, pointing to just an array of underlying factors that can expose a facility to contamination. And the last finding I want to share from this study is around the costs associated with contamination. So we found that on average, 21% of a composter's operating costs are spent on contamination removal. So 21%, as you probably imagine, that is a significant portion of overall operating costs that are going towards contamination. And on the right-hand side, this table captures the total annual operating costs spent on contamination across 7 facilities in our study who accept compostable packaging. And really what we've done here is we worked with each composter to understand a few things about their operations to calculate these percentages. But simply put, this percentage encompasses both labor and an allocated percentage of equipment used to address contamination compared to their overall operating costs. What you see is that lower cost facilities, for example, like those highlighted here, appear to allocate a higher percentage of operational cost to contamination management compared to the mid-cost and higher cost facilities. And when looking at the mid and high cost facility categories, which are now highlighted, we see averages of around 13 and 14% of total annual operating costs going towards contamination. Now, really this is significant because we know that the composting business model today relies on operational efficiency and the ability to maximize material throughput, excuse me. So if these findings hold true at scale, very important that we find ways to compensate composters for this reality. Okay, and I'm going to switch into our disintegration study now, 3 key findings from this infill pilot. I do want to just provide a quick overview of what we tested. This was the largest known field test of certified compostable packaging conducted in North America. In total, over 23,000 units of compostable packaging were tested, including both compostable plastics and fiber. And the images shown on the right just provide some examples of the types of certified food contact compostable products we tested. So everything from snack packaging to coffee cups to cutlery, etc. And at the highest level, this study was really important because it was about replacing some anecdotes that prevail in the industry with data. We wanted to replace opinions with insights and equip municipalities, policymakers, regulators, and composters with information to make critical decisions, really, around what is going into their local organics collection programs, what composters choose to accept or not, as well as some legislation. So we hope that the data from this study can drive those really important discussions and decisions and kind of debunk any existing myths that exist around compostable packaging and its performance in the field. And I just wanted to share this slide to share with you all where we took measurements. So we took measurements at 2 points of the process in the field. Our first measurement was taken around day 47 of the process, and then our last measurement was taken at the end of curing or day 90, whichever came first. And something that was really distinct and unique about this study is that we measured compost operating parameters alongside disintegration results. So we have a lot of great data on what was happening in the piles themselves and how those conditions support compostable packaging disintegration. And the parameters we examined, we looked at moisture, we looked at temperature, oxygen, pH, carbon to nitrogen ratio, just to name a few. And those operating parameters were defined and dictated by the definitions laid out in the Composting Handbook, which is a very well-regarded resource used by the industry to reflect best-in-class operating guidelines. So with that context, I'll share 3 key findings from our study. The first is around those operating parameters, which I just mentioned. Now, our data shows that certified food contact compostable packaging does sufficiently break down at commercial composting facilities that meet these reasonable operating parameters. So all 10 composters in our study consistently operated within these reasonable operating conditions, which is great news. And they also met maturity and stability criteria, or the compost samples, I should say, taken from each facility met maturity and stability criteria. So what this means is if you're operating well and you're meeting these operating parameters, you are optimized for processing these very complex feedstocks like consumer food waste and compostable packaging. And as municipal programs begin to accept more food waste and compostable packaging, and if composters want to begin accepting these more complex feedstocks, it's really helpful for them to understand these operational parameters and how they need to operate to meet and maintain these throughout the composting process to make sure that these materials are breaking down in a reasonable period of time, and ultimately contributing to that clean, valuable end product. The second takeaway I wanted to share was around compostable plastic performance in the field. And our data confirms that compostable plastics perform very well, and they successfully disintegrate in the field, irrespective of compost technology, irrespective of field test method, of which we tested 2 different types of methods, and even material type. So on average, compostable plastic packaging and products broke down 98% by surface area when composted. And this meets the existing industry thresholds for disintegration, which is a really important point. The Compost Manufacturing Alliance, CMA, which many of you have probably heard of, they're a composting industry group that uses in-field disintegration thresholds, which are specific to material types, so plastic and fiber. And those are the standards that we're referencing here. So really great to see such strong performance. Our team poured over dozens of hypotheses to understand what's influencing the disintegration of compostable plastics, but really there was no clear correlation between operating parameters and compostable plastic. It's just by and large, they performed very strong and very well. And usually the disintegration had actually taken place during that first half of the study. So before that midpoint test point, which I referenced before, which occurred around day 47 of the trial period. So very strong performance across the board. And last but not least, I wanted to share a key finding on fiber. So how is compostable fiber packaging breaking down in the field? We found that on average, fiber packaging and products broke down 83% by surface area when composted, which again exceeds the existing industry thresholds for disintegration laid out by CMA, as I mentioned before. And composters across the US seem to favor compostable fiber packaging for 2 reasons. First, fiber provides some structural support to the compost and enables porosity in that compost pile. And second, many composters don't consider fiber packaging a contaminant, even when fragments remain in the finished product, because it's not included as a contaminant in many state compost quality requirements. So it's just really interesting to note just sort of the slight differences in overall performance between compostable plastics and compostable fibers, knowing that the 2 are often seen in different lights in the industry and sometimes kind of held to different standards for understandable reasons. And we wanted to also know kind of what was influencing the performance of fiber packaging. And I can say that we found that fiber was definitely influenced by mechanical agitation or turning. And we also found that consistent moisture levels above 50% support the disintegration of fiber packaging and products. So again, knowing what helps these materials break down is really important and can help aid the disintegration of fiber packaging and materials, which might take a little more agitation, mechanical turning, and moisture to kind of see those full disintegration results all the way through. So with that, I know I flew through some really lots of data and information. I kind of did my best to keep it at the 10,000 foot level for everyone here and talk through some key takeaways, but I did want to provide references to our reports, which came out earlier this year. So feel free to scan the QR codes, and happy to share links to our data and insights with this group after the call. And again, so sorry for my my coughing spell along the way. Thanks for bearing with me, everyone. But I hope you found this informative and interesting, and I'm looking forward to taking questions at the end of this webinar.
Oh, that was just excellent. Thank you so much, Elly. I'm sorry, Carolyn. Yeah, I appreciate the high level, and I also appreciate you saying that you would be willing to talk to people maybe at a more gritty level at another point. I was jotting down notes, and that was one of my questions. So, so again, thank you so very much, not only for that presentation, but also for this really seminal research. I love how you address some of the issues that are that face organizers and planners like myself. trying to weigh those pros and cons. So that was very, very helpful and thought-provoking. Our next speaker, talking about getting down and gritty with the details, is a facility manager. Billy Crocker is the manager of McGill Environmental Systems Bees Ferry facility in Charleston, South Carolina. That is a public-private partnership with Charleston County that began in 2020. The Bees Ferry production facility processes 65,000 tons of yard waste annually for its compost and mulch products, and utilizing 3,000 tons of food waste and compostable materials as well. So, Billy, without any further ado, I'm going to let you share your screen and share your presentation.
Thank you very much. Those were excellent presentations ahead of me. I got quite a bit of great information out of those, and I'll be following up with you all afterwards. I just want to say I really appreciate that. That was really good stuff and some great data. So my presentation is when landfilling is not an option. Here at the Bees Ferry facility, and as it was mentioned in the introduction, this is a public-private partnership with Charleston County, and we're considered a medium-sized facility, bringing in about 60,000 tons of yard waste a year and 3,000 tons of food waste and compostables. And that supply of food waste and compostables is growing every month. We're only one of 4 facilities in South Carolina that accepts food waste, and the only one that's accepting really a wide array of compostables, or a wide array of compostables and PLAs. Excuse me. And our goal has been to not divert any problematic materials to the landfill. The last thing we want is to, I guess you can say, rephrase that. We're not looking for the easy way out. Our goal has been to address every objection a composter may have for opting out of processing compostables and bioplastics, and coming up with solutions that would inspire others to get back in. We're trying to prove that it can be done.
I'm going to interrupt you because we're not able to see your presentation. Are you going to share, or do you need us to share your presentation for you?
I'm really sorry. Is my screen not shared?
It's not.
Oh, okay. Just one second.
Yeah, we can put it up for you. I've got it up there now. So Billy, don't worry. Just tell me when to change the slides.
Sorry, one second. I don't want you to have to interrupt. I'm trying to figure out why it's not pulling up. Okay, that's all right. I'll go with that,
Okay,
if you don't mind.
not at all.
Is this the second? Excuse me.
There you go. Okay. Thanks all for that.
No. Thank you for stopping me there. Anyways, so that's our introduction. Is just we have done a lot with testing the breakdown rates of bioplastics and compostables, and trying to find methods and solutions that keep our compost clean, methods and solutions that prevent any of it from going to the landfill. Excuse me, in the next slide. The average facility produces finished compost in about a 12-week cycle, some more, some less. The heavy, dense bioplastics can require 6 months or more for complete degradation. And that's based on our experience here at this facility with the heavier cups and spoons and things like that. This causes the ratio of bioplastics to organic feedstocks to rise as the partially degraded material is fed back into the next composting cycle. We work on a 12-week cycle, so anything that is not broken down gets reintroduced and essentially go back through the system again. And there's only so much that a compost media can hold, so different methods are needed to process the growing volumes of compostable post-consumer products. Excuse me, next slide, please. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Thank you. In compost production, the dense food waste tends to stay put. The lightweight plastics and fibrous materials do not. The separation is inevitable during the composting process, and it requires additional measures to recollect it and blend it back in. Continual collection and reintegrating the fallout has forced many composters to opt out. In one of the previous slides, it was noted that about 20% of operational costs are contaminants, and I would attribute it to that. Most windrows are turned on a weekly or monthly basis, and the materials that are either lighter weight or denser tend to fall out. And if you're an outdoor facility, the wind could move the products as well. So in higher concentration, there's a lot of collecting, bringing it back and putting it back into the process. Next slide, please. Industrial volumes of compostables require industrial solutions. A one-size-fits-all composting method only gets you so far. As the material stream evolves, so too must the process. The characteristics of organic feedstocks and many bioplastics are far apart. So two separate composting processes are needed for the greatest gains in efficiency. The compostables with slower degradation require a process tailored to their performance characteristics and degradation timescale. A process where timetables are of little consequence sounds counterintuitive, but since landfill diversion is the end goal of our efforts, we have to have a solution that shows promise. Excuse me. And that's essentially what we've done. As the percentage of compostables has continued to climb in relationship to our set levels of yard waste feedstocks, we've begun to divert the two. We don't take all of the compostables and bioplastics out of the food waste that comes in, but we try to take a good bit of it out and segregate it. Next slide. We didn't intend for this this method to truly be as successful as it has. So we jokingly called this the eco pit. It's a 75 by 75 containment that allows for enough degradation and volume reduction to match about 50 tons a week of food waste mixed with compostable post-consumer products. Essentially, the structure itself is just 8 to 10 inch perimeter walls that conceals what's going on inside. It's hollowed out into the middle. And what we found has been effective is a majority of the compostables that we know are going to take, let's say, 3 months, 4 or 5 months to break down. We take them out and we put them in the middle of the eco pit. We thought that the eco pit would fill up and we would have to build a second one and a third one, but we were surprised at how fast the bioplastics and a lot of even the fibrous materials inside have begun, or they actually do break down, that it never really fills up. It almost seemed like magic that it was all breaking down and it wasn't overflowing or hasn't overflowed. But in one of the previous slides that Caroline presented, a lot of the bioplastics, when they degrade down to a 2 or a 3% total volume of their original state. Now, what you see in the picture is the second eco pit. We had to redesign a portion of our facility and took down the first eco pit and were able to screen the material that was at the bottom, and it absolutely produces usable compost. We simply scraped the top layer off of the material that wasn't all the way broken down, and underneath was several feet of great compost. We started the first eco pit a little over 18 months ago, and we continually divert a lot of the again, the larger the heavier, the denser the materials. A lot of times when we have events in the area, we'll get all of the compostable materials, as it's a zero waste event, and you might have 50,000 cups and plates. And trying to integrate that into your compost immediately, much of it will separate and fall out, but it's still good stuff. It's covered in food waste and eventually will make great compost. So again, we divert as much as we can. We put it in the eco pit. At ground level, you can't even really see what's in there. So we're trying to restore the aesthetics of the compost facility so that it doesn't look so much like material blowing around or material separating. And it's just been an effective method for us. Next slide, please. The containment is simply built with materials that a composter has on site. We have plenty of yard waste grinds. It's easy to make the walls. It can be made of wood chips. It can be made of anything. The important part is just to have high walls along the or a high perimeter wall so that the wind is not likely to take the material out. On the second version, we also put a light fence around the top to catch any further lightweight stuff from blowing out, but we really don't add any cover on top of it. We haven't had to. You would think that you would need to cover it to keep the moisture level high and get the temperatures up, but the process of just adding the material in, the cups tend to melt and lose their shape and flatten, and the fibrous materials break down quick. They pile on top of each other, and they just continue the breakdown cycle. So in essence, we've taken material that we know is going to take many, many months to break down. We put it in here and just stop watching the clock. We're able to still produce our top line premium compost as usual. And a lot of these compostables get put in here so that it's just not we're not dealing with as many of the labor problems of recollecting it, blowing out. It's been really an effective method for us so far, but it's really not the end of the game or the end of the line. We'll be developing it further. Next slide, please. The key for a composting facility is to gain access to more food waste. And essentially most of to gain access to higher volumes of food waste, a composter has to have a tolerance to compostables and yes, a certain level of contamination. But we've found that we are able to get much more food waste in by allowing the compostables and the bioplastics in. And in essence, back up a little bit, we're limited. Our compost production is limited by the volume of food waste that comes in. You can only thin it so much to have the most effective breakdown process in a 12-week cycle. So in essence, being tolerant of these materials coming in, even though there's additional labor costs that come in, we found that we can produce much more compost. We've gone from producing 5,000 cubic yards a year to close to 20,000 this year. Next slide, please. This is essentially just a bridge to buy time. Plastic manufacturers are making great strides in end-of-life considerations. New formulations and advanced polymers will decrease degradation time. I'm sure y'all are just as aware as I am. There are so many new products that are out there that are still in testing, but break down much faster than what's being utilized right now. And there's certain methods to extract the polymers back out. It may be a while before those make it to mass market, but I don't think we're going to be here 10 years from now with composters still raising objections that it's not breaking down fast enough. I think it's going to get better and better every year with better products that break down faster. and allow more composters to get back into the game in essence. Providing the mechanisms with optimal conditions for rapid degradation of the bioplastics can be part of a composting operation without commingling of the two. In essence, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Yes, there are certain drawbacks to taking the compostable products in the bioplastic, but you can take that and you can concentrate it and segregate it, and you can essentially make other composting products that are of less critical use, let's say for erosion or DOT, roadside projects and things of the like. And at the same time, you're able to make that premium compost product that's your namesake without having to commingle the two. In essence, concentrating the compostables and the bioplastics into certain batches or certain mixes are possible. And again, at the same time, having a separate operation that is producing compost as you normally would with your 12 or your 14 or 16 week cycle. I mentioned earlier, this isn't the end of our evolution or the end all solution. We believe the next step is when the compostables and bioplastics are coming in, as we're pulling them out and segregating them, it would be best, or we have plans to build the infrastructure, not just to separate that material by mechanical means, but to shred it and to bring it down to a smaller 1/2-inch size. In most of our tests, the bioplastics shrink about 1/2 of an inch in a 60-day window. So if you're able to take that material and shrink it or shred it down into a 1/2 inch before it goes into the composting, you're in essence guaranteeing that that product is going to break down in your 12 or your 10-week window by reducing it on the front end before it even goes into the process. And again, that too can be concentrated into small batches, so there aren't any concerns about the particles not fully breaking down or getting into your premium products or affecting the quality of your top of your line product. I think that is my last slide. Yep.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Billy, that is absolutely astonishing. I don't think I'm alone on the call just to be kind of impressed and flabbergasted at the same time that this relatively simple solution was so effective. So thank you so much for sharing that with the group. I think that you're going to be getting a few calls about how you manifested that potentially. But I also am really interested in all the pros and cons that we've heard. Some of them may seem kind of contradictory, but anybody in this business knows that you have to kind of weigh pros and cons and see where your happy middle is. Just hearing about the the externalities and the production from Elly, and then that even though they're more maybe extractive, the plastic polymers break down more effectively. And then from Billy, that there's a time tension with the facility trying to move the material through quickly. So there's this wonderful mix of tensions that have been expressed in this presentation. So thank you all so very much. I don't see any questions in the chat. We are at the hour, but you all know how to get in touch with us. I sincerely hope. I mentioned again, I will mention again, our website is www.carolinacompost.com. You can sign up for our e-newsletter, find out about the rest of the ICAW presentations that are happening the rest of this week. This is just the first of 5 events that we are being a part of this week. And thank you all for, Kat had a question. If a product is made from plants, is it compostable? Absolutely not. It should say that it's compostable.
Thanks, Muriel.
That's been a pain point for
I
sure.
thought, it's just so deceiving when it's a plastic spoon made from plants. It makes you feel like you can compost it, but look
Not
for
always.
certified
Not
label.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the polymer. Alrighty, so without, let's see, I'm looking in the chat now myself. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending and to our panelists. It was wonderful. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Happy International Compost Week.
That's right.